He wasn't supposed to survive. With his last dollar, a homeless man made a choice to buy his dog one last meal. It was a decision that would change everything. The streets were cold, the air thick with the scent of rain and asphalt. The city was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic, the sound of lives moving past, but none of them noticing the man and his dog huddled together on the corner. His coat was torn, and the soles of his shoes were worn through, but it wasn't the man who caught people's attention. It was the loyal German shepherd at his side. The dog, tired and thin, stared up at his owner with eyes that spoke volumes. The kind of eyes that said, "I'll stay with you, no matter how hard it gets." With no money left, no hope to cling to, and no food in sight, the man's heart ached for his companion. The dog didn't complain. He just sat, eyes alert, waiting. They had nowhere to go. They had nothing. The man fumbled for $1 in his pocket, his last. He walked into a small store, hoping the little bit would stretch. But as the man handed over his last bit of cash, the clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, saw the sadness behind the man's gaze. Without saying a word, she handed the man a small sandwich. "For your dog," she said, a simple act of kindness that spoke louder than words. The man didn't understand at first. He had nothing to give her in return, but she insisted. "He's family," she added softly. The man nodded, his eyes welling up with gratitude. As he stepped back outside, he saw his dog waiting patiently, tail wagging slightly at the sight of the sandwich. He knelt down, sharing the small meal with his loyal companion. As they ate, a warmth began to spread inside him. It wasn't the meal. It wasn't the sandwich. It was the kindness from a stranger that was more valuable than anything else. With each bite, the hope that had been buried deep inside him began to awaken again. What he didn't know was that the universe had something more in store for him. A miracle was about to happen. The very next day, a car pulled up beside him as he sat with his dog, the sun shining for the first time in weeks. A man stepped out, dressed in a sharp suit, with a briefcase in his hand. He approached the homeless man, looking him over before speaking. "I've been looking for someone like you," the man said. "You and your dog." The homeless man could barely understand what he was hearing, but as the conversation went on, he learned that this stranger was offering him a chance, an opportunity that would change everything. The man and his dog were no longer invisible. They were about to get a second chance at life, a chance that felt as miraculous as the kindness that had been shown to them the day before. As the man and his dog followed the stranger into the car, they both knew that the storm was over. A new chapter had begun, and it was brighter than anything they could have ever imagined. The car door closed with a soft thud, and the homeless man sat in the passenger seat, staring at the man in the suit who had offered him a lifeline. His dog, still by his side, lay quietly in the back seat, its amber eyes wide with confusion and curiosity. The stranger, who had introduced himself as Daniel, kept his eyes on the road as they drove through the bustling city. The man's mind was still reeling from the unexpected turn his life had taken. Just yesterday, he had been on the streets with nothing but his dog and the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. And now, he was being offered a chance he could hardly believe. "I've been in a similar situation," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "I know what it's like to feel like the world has forgotten you, but I believe that everyone deserves a second chance." The homeless man, whose name was Jack, nodded, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. The road outside the car window was passing by in a blur, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. Jack's hands shook slightly as he gripped the seatbelt, unsure of what to say or how to feel. "I want to help you, Jack," Daniel continued, glancing briefly at him. "I have a place where you and your dog can stay, and I can offer you work, something that will allow you to get back on your feet." Jack looked down at his dog, who was now resting its head on the back seat, the soft rise and fall of its chest steady and comforting. He had spent so many sleepless nights with this dog by his side, fighting for survival on the streets. Now, for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a flicker of hope. When the car finally stopped, they were outside a large building, a place that looked nothing like the rundown shelters Jack had stayed in before. "This is it," Daniel said. "You and your dog are welcome here, for as long as you need." Jack stepped out of the car, his legs feeling unsteady, as if the weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders. His dog followed closely behind, its loyalty never wavering. Inside, The warmth of the building contrasted sharply with the cold, harsh reality of the streets they had just left behind. Daniel led them to a small but comfortable apartment, furnished with everything they could need. "Take your time," Daniel said with a kind smile. "You've both been through a lot. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow about the next steps." As Jack sat down on the couch, his dog curled up beside him. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of a warm, safe place. For the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't worried about where his next meal would come from or whether he would have a place to sleep. He had a roof over his head, and he had his dog, the one thing that had never left him. The next morning, as the sunlight streamed through the windows, Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He and his dog were no longer alone in the world. They had been given a second chance, and Jack was determined to make the most of it. As he sat at the kitchen table, a warm cup of coffee in his hands, he looked over at his dog, who was now happily munching on some food. "We've made it, buddy," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We've made it." It wasn't just the food or the shelter. It was the kindness of a stranger, the offer of a new beginning, that had turned Jack's world around. And for the first time in years, Jack truly believed that. Maybe, just maybe, miracles could happen. The days that followed were filled with small, but significant changes. Jack woke up every morning with a sense of purpose, the weight of his past slowly lifting with each passing hour. His dog, now settled in this new life, was no longer the tired, wary animal from the streets. It was as if the warmth of the home had awakened a new energy in both of them. The first time Jack took his dog for a walk around the neighborhood, he couldn't help but feel like he was seeing the world through new eyes. The streets didn't seem so cold and unforgiving anymore. People smiled at him, nodding in recognition, as if they saw him differently. He wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was a man with a second chance. Daniel, the man who had helped him, kept his word. He introduced Jack to a local construction company where he could work. The first day on the job, Jack was nervous, unsure of how he would fit in. But to his surprise, the workers were kind, welcoming him as if he had been part of the team all along. They didn't see the man who had once been homeless. They saw the man who showed up every day, ready to work, with a determination that spoke volumes. As the weeks went by, Jack found himself working harder than ever before. He had something to prove, not just to the people around him, but to himself. He had spent so many years feeling like he was worth nothing. Now, he was starting to believe that he was capable of more. His dog, always by his side, seemed to understand this transformation. The bond between them grew stronger, as if they were both healing together. One evening, after a long day at work, Jack sat down on the couch with his dog, his faithful companion. They had come a long way from the cold streets. Jack had a steady job, a roof over his head, and the loyalty of a dog who never gave up on him. The miracle wasn't just the new life he had found. It was the fact that he had someone to share it with. That night, as the stars twinkled outside his window, Jack felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. His dog lay at his feet, content and calm, the two of them a symbol of perseverance, of loyalty, and of the power of second chances. In that moment, Jack knew that no matter what life had thrown at him, he had made it. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. Jack stood at the door, looking out at the world beyond the small apartment that had become his sanctuary. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city, and for the first time in years, Jack felt at peace. His dog sat by his side, its presence a constant reminder of how far they had come. The dog's eyes followed Jack's every movement, its loyalty unwavering. They had both been through so much, and yet here they were, standing side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Jack had worked hard to get to this point, and every day had been a step closer to something better. The construction job had become more than just a paycheck. It was a symbol of his commitment, his determination to build a future that was no longer defined by the struggles of his past. He had a routine now, a purpose that gave him a sense of pride. He wasn't just surviving. He was living. The world outside was still the same, bustling with people rushing to their destinations, lost in their own lives. But Jack didn't feel invisible anymore. He had found his place in the world, and it was here, in this small apartment, with his loyal dog by his side. That evening, after a long day of work, Jack sat down at the kitchen table, a hot meal in front of him. He looked at his dog, who was contently lying on the rug, its eyes closed in a peaceful slumber. The bond between them was stronger than ever, a silent understanding that spoke volumes. Jack reached down and scratched behind his dog's ears, a smile tugging at his lips. "We made it, buddy," he whispered, the words full of gratitude. "We really made it." As the days passed, Jack continued to find strength in the life he was building. He had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull him back into the darkness. But he kept moving forward. With his dog at his side, he knew he could face anything. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Jack believed it could be bright. One evening, as he walked home from work, he found himself looking up at the stars, something he hadn't done in years. The night sky was clear, the stars shining brightly above him. It was as if the universe was reminding him that, no matter how hard the journey had been, he had made it through. He had survived. And now, he was thriving. Jack smiled as he walked through the door of his apartment, his dog following closely behind. The familiar warmth of home enveloped him, and for the first time, he truly felt like he belonged. He wasn't just a man with a past. He was a man with a future. And with his dog by his side, he knew that anything was possible. Months passed, and with each one, Jack felt the transformation deepen. His mornings were no longer filled with the uncertainty of where he would sleep or if he would eat. Instead, he woke to the steady rhythm of a life he was building, the kind of life he had always dreamed of but never thought possible. His job at the construction site became more than just a paycheck. It was a testament to his resilience, to the quiet strength he had found within himself. His dog, now healthier and stronger, continued to be his constant companion, always by his side, whether he was working, walking through the park, or just sitting at home in the quiet of the evening. The bond between them had only grown, a bond forged through shared hardship and unconditional loyalty. Jack often found himself marveling at how far they had come. There were still days when the weight of his past threatened to pull him under, but he no longer let it define him. He had found purpose, not just for himself, but for his dog, too. One Saturday afternoon, Jack decided to take a walk with his dog to the nearby park. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow on everything it touched. As they walked, Jack found himself smiling at the people around him, at the families enjoying the day, the children playing in the grass. It was a scene he never thought he would be part of. He had been an outsider for so long, invisible to the world. But now, he was part of it, and it felt good. As they reached the park, Jack sat down on a bench, his dog sitting beside him, its head resting on his knee. He watched the world go by, feeling a deep sense of peace. It was in moments like this that he realized how much he had changed. He had once been consumed by fear, by the uncertainty of his future. But now, he was content, knowing that he had a place in the world. He had a job, a home, and most importantly, he had his dog. The afternoon drifted by, and as the sun began to set, Jack felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. He had made it. He had gone from being homeless and forgotten to building a life that was his own. And through it all, his dog had been there, a symbol of the loyalty and love that had carried them both through the darkest of times. As they headed back home, Jack knew that whatever the future held, he was ready. He was no longer the man he had been when he first walked the streets. He was someone new, someone with a future, with a purpose, and with the love of his dog by his side. The days grew warmer as spring settled in, and Jack's life continued to unfold in ways he had never imagined. His routine had become something he cherished, a sense of stability that was now his reality. Each morning, he woke to the sound of birds outside the window, the warmth of sunlight streaming in. His dog, always by his side, had become a symbol of the transformation that had taken place. It was no longer just about survival, it was about living. Jack had a purpose now, a job he was proud of, and a place where he truly belonged. But as much as his life had changed, there were moments that still reminded him of where he had come from. One evening, as he walked home from work, he passed the alleyway where he used to sleep, the spot where he had spent countless nights huddled against the cold. For a brief moment, he stopped, looking at the familiar place. It was strange how it felt so far away now. He had been so lost in those days, struggling to find hope, to see a way out. But now, he could see that he had moved past it. His life was no longer defined by the shadows of his past. His dog stood beside him, looking up at him with those familiar amber eyes. It was as if the dog could sense his thoughts, offering silent reassurance. Together, they had faced the harshest parts of life and come out stronger. When Jack got home, he sat down at the kitchen table, his dog lying at his feet. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. He realized just how much he had grown, how much he had learned. There were days when he still couldn't quite believe how far he had come, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer the man he used to be. His past had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. It was a part of his story, but it was no longer the whole story. As he sat there, Jack thought about the future. It was bright, full of possibilities. He had dreams now, things he wanted to achieve, places he wanted to go. His dog, ever faithful, seemed to share those dreams, always by his side, ready for whatever came next. Jack smiled as he scratched behind his dog's ears. "We've made it," he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, he truly believed it. It had been nearly a year since Jack's life had taken that unexpected turn, and as the seasons changed, so did his outlook on life. The man who had once walked the streets with no hope was now standing tall, building a future he had never thought possible. His job at the construction site had become something he looked forward to every day. The steady rhythm of his work, the satisfaction of a job well done, filled him with a sense of accomplishment. But it wasn't just the work that had transformed his life. It was the quiet moments spent with his dog, the bond between them deepening with each passing day. One afternoon, after a long day on the job, Jack sat on the couch, his dog resting its head on his lap. He stroked the dog's fur, feeling the warmth of its body, the steady rise and fall of its breath. It had been with him through everything, through the darkest moments when he thought he had nothing left, through the moments of doubt when he questioned if things would ever change. And now, here they were, in a home of their own, no longer worried about where they would sleep or how they would eat. Jack looked out the window, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world outside seemed to move at a fast pace, but in this moment, Jack was content to just be. He had everything he needed right here, a roof over his head, a steady income, and most importantly, a dog who had never left his side. He thought about how far he had come and felt a deep sense of gratitude. His past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. He had worked hard to rebuild his life, to make something of himself, and now he was living in the present, not the past. The dog looked up at him with those familiar amber eyes, as if understanding everything he was feeling. Jack smiled and whispered, "We made it, buddy. We really did." It wasn't just the life he had built for himself. It was the life he had built with his dog. They had faced so many challenges together, but they had made it through. And as Jack sat there, with his dog by his side, he knew that the future was bright. There was no limit to what they could achieve together. For the first time in his life, Jack felt like he truly had a second chance. And with that second chance, he was determined to make the most of it. As the months passed, Jack's life continued to grow in ways that once seemed unimaginable. He had found not only a home, but also a community, a place where he was valued and appreciated. His work at the construction site was no longer just a means to an end. It had become a passion, something that gave him pride. The days were long, but Jack no longer felt the weight of every hour. He was no longer exhausted in the same way he used to be. Instead, he felt a quiet satisfaction in every task completed, every project finished. His dog, his faithful companion, was always with him, waiting for him at the end of each day, offering comfort with just a look. The bond between them had only grown stronger. They had shared a journey from the streets to this new life, and now they were partners in a world that was finally offering them both the chance to thrive. One Saturday morning, Jack woke up early, as he had grown accustomed to doing. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light across the room. His dog, as usual, was by his side, curled up on the rug. Jack stretched, then quietly made his way to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. As he stood at the counter, cracking eggs and pouring coffee, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. It was moments like these that he treasured, moments of peace, of simplicity. The life he had built wasn't perfect, but it was his, and that was enough. After breakfast, Jack and his dog took their usual walk to the park. The air was crisp, and the world seemed to be waking up alongside them. Jack felt a quiet joy in the rhythm of his steps, the sound of his dog's paws padding along the pavement beside him. The park was filled with families, joggers, and people enjoying the fresh air, and Jack couldn't help but smile. He no longer felt like an outsider. He was a part of this world, and it felt good. They sat on a bench near the pond, watching the ducks swim lazily across the water. Jack's dog lay at his feet, content to simply be there with him. For a moment, Jack let himself reflect on how far he had come. It wasn't just the material things, though he had more now than he ever thought possible. It was the peace of mind he had found. He had found stability, security, and, above all, he had found the joy of living, something he had almost forgotten. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jack stood up, brushing the crumbs from his pants. He knew he had a lot to look forward to. His life was still unfolding, and though he couldn't predict the future, he knew one thing for certain. With his dog by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. As they walked back home, Jack's heart felt light. He had found his place in the world, and it was exactly where he was meant to be. It had been a few months since Jack's life had truly settled into a rhythm that felt like home. Every morning, he woke up with purpose, the warmth of his bed a comforting reminder of how far he had come. His dog, now a healthy and happy companion, woke with him, tail wagging, always eager for the day ahead. Jack had found his place in the world, a place where he was no longer defined by his past struggles. He worked hard every day, building a future that was entirely his own. At work, Jack was respected by his colleagues, and he carried a quiet pride in the work he did. The days were still long, but they were filled with a sense of accomplishment that made the time pass quickly. In the evenings, when he returned home, his dog was always there to greet him, offering a kind of companionship that words could never fully capture. The bond they shared had become the foundation of his new life. They had both been through so much, but now they were moving forward, together. Jack had found more than just a roof over his head. He had found a life he could be proud of. The city outside his window continued its usual pace, but for Jack, everything had changed. He no longer felt invisible. When he walked down the street, he no longer felt the weight of his past bearing down on him. Instead, he felt like he belonged, like he had earned his place in the world. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Jack sat on the porch with his dog by his side, watching the sun set behind the buildings. It was a peaceful moment, one that Jack had come to treasure. He thought about how far he had come, about the days he spent in fear and uncertainty, and how now, he was living a life that felt secure and full of promise. His dog, as always, sat next to him, its head resting on his knee. They had been through so much together, and Jack knew they would continue to face whatever came next, side by side. The future, though still uncertain, no longer felt daunting. With every passing day, Jack grew stronger, more confident. He had built a life from nothing, and now, he was living it. The man who once felt hopeless now stood tall, knowing that no matter what happened, he had made it through the hardest part. And as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack felt a quiet joy settle in his chest. He was no longer just surviving. He was truly living. The days grew longer as the warmth of summer began to settle in. Jack's life was no longer a series of difficult moments, but rather a steady stream of achievements, both big and small. His dog, always by his side, had become a symbol of the resilience they had shared. Together, they had faced the harshest parts of life, and now they were moving forward, stronger than ever. Jack had become accustomed to the new rhythm of his life. He worked hard every day, and when he came home, there was always a warm greeting waiting for him. His dog had settled into their new life just as much as Jack had, finding comfort in the simple routine of their days. On weekends, they would go for long walks, exploring new parts of the city, meeting new people, and enjoying the fresh air. Jack no longer felt the weight of his past. Instead, he looked forward to the future. One Saturday afternoon, Jack took his dog to the local park, as he had done so many times before. The sun was high in the sky, the park bustling with families and children playing. It was a scene that Jack had once watched from the outside, but now he was part of it. As he walked through the park, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He was no longer the man who had walked the streets in search of a place to sleep or food to eat. He was someone new, someone who had built a life from nothing. His dog trotted beside him, happy and healthy, its tail wagging in the breeze. They found a quiet spot near the lake and sat down, watching the world go by. Jack reached into his bag and pulled out a small treat for his dog, who accepted it with a grateful look in its eyes. As Jack sat there, watching his dog enjoy the treat, he realized how far he had come. The man who had once felt hopeless, who had believed that life had no more to offer, now felt content. He had a steady job, a home, and most importantly, he had his dog. It was hard to believe that it had all started with a single decision. The decision to trust, to believe that things could get better. Jack had made that choice, and now, here he was, living a life he could be proud of. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Jack felt a sense of peace. He had everything he needed, and with his dog by his side, he knew that whatever the future held, he was ready. The world was no longer an uncertain place. It was a place where Jack belonged, a place where he and his dog had built a life filled with love, loyalty, and hope. The months continued to pass, and Jack's life unfolded with a steady sense of fulfillment. His dog, always by his side, had become more than just a companion. It was a reminder of how far they had come together, a symbol of resilience and loyalty. Jack's mornings were filled with purpose as he prepared for another day of work. He had grown used to the routine, the rhythm of his life that was now centered around his job, his home, and his dog. The challenges of the past seemed like distant memories, replaced by the certainty of the future. He had built a life that was secure, stable, and, most importantly, meaningful. One morning, after a particularly long week of work, Jack sat down on the porch with his dog. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow across the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the world around him calm. Jack looked at his dog, who was lying contentedly beside him, and smiled. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. His dog had been there for him through everything. The days of hardship, the struggles of living on the streets, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Now his dog was with him as he faced a future that was bright with possibilities. He had a steady income, a roof over his head, and a sense of belonging. Jack felt gratitude in every breath he took. The bond between him and his dog had only deepened, and together, they had created a life that was full of love and trust. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, truly living. One afternoon, Jack decided to take a break from his usual routine and spend the day with his dog in the park. The air was fresh, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. They walked along the path, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. Jack felt a sense of lightness in his heart, as though the weight of the past had finally been lifted. The park was filled with families, children running and playing, and the sound of laughter in the air. Jack watched them, feeling a sense of peace that he had never known before. He had been through so much to get to this point, and now, here he was, enjoying the fruits of his labor. As the day went on, Jack and his dog found a quiet spot by the lake. They sat together, watching the water ripple gently as the sun began to set. Jack looked at his dog, feeling a deep connection that words could never fully express. His dog was not just a pet, it was family. And with that, Jack realized that everything he had worked for, everything he had hoped for, was right here. He had a future, he had love, and most importantly, he had his dog. In that moment, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Jack knew that no matter what came next, he was ready. Together, they had built a life full of hope, and that was all that mattered. It had been over a year since Jack had started this new chapter in his life, and as the seasons continued to change, so did his outlook on the future. He had found stability, not just in his job or his home, but in the simple joy of living each day with his dog by his side. Jack no longer carried the burden of the past, the weight that once threatened to pull him under. His mornings were filled with purpose, his afternoons with work that brought both pride and a sense of accomplishment. But it was in the quiet moments, when he and his dog would walk through the park or sit together watching the sun set, that Jack truly felt the depth of his transformation. He had come to realize that the true value of his life wasn't measured by what he had, but by the people and the relationships he had built along the way. The bond he shared with his dog was a constant reminder of this. It was a bond that had started in the most difficult of circumstances and had only deepened as they both navigated their way through the hardships of life. On one particular evening, Jack sat at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hand, as his dog lay at his feet, content and peaceful. The world outside the window was alive with the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But inside his small apartment, there was a calmness that Jack had never known before. He had built this life for himself, brick by brick, through hard work, perseverance, and a belief that things could get better. And now, he had everything he needed: security, companionship, and hope for the future. He often thought back to the days when he had felt invisible, when he was just another face on the street, overlooked by those around him. But now, he was seen, not just by others, but by himself as well. He was no longer a man defined by his past. He was a man with a future, a man who had earned his place in the world. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, Jack decided to take his dog on a long walk through the neighborhood. The air was cool, and the streets were quiet. It was a perfect evening for reflection, and Jack found himself thinking about all the things he had accomplished. He had worked hard to get here, and while the journey had been long, it had been worth every step. As they walked, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought about how far he and his dog had come, how they had both fought to survive, and how, together, they had created something beautiful. They reached the park, and as they sat on a bench, Jack looked at his dog, who was now fully at ease, its tail wagging gently. Jack smiled and whispered, "We've come a long way, haven't we, buddy?" The dog looked up at him, its eyes full of trust, its presence a silent reminder that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Jack's heart was full as he watched the sun dip below the horizon. He was no longer a man lost in the shadows of his past. He was a man who had found his way, and with his dog by his side, he knew that anything was possible. As time passed, Jack continued to embrace the life he had worked so hard to build. Each day, he woke up with a sense of purpose, knowing that he was moving forward, not just existing but truly living. His dog, now fully healthy and thriving, had become his anchor, the one constant in a world that had once seemed uncertain. They had become a team, facing everything life had thrown at them together. It was a bond forged in adversity, but it had grown into something deeper, something Jack had never imagined was possible. Jack's work at the construction site continued to bring him pride, but it was the small, quiet moments that truly filled his heart. There were mornings when he would sit on the porch with his dog, watching the sunrise and listening to the sounds of the world waking up around them. In these moments, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything he had, everything he had overcome. He no longer felt the weight of his past hanging over him. The man who had once wandered the streets, searching for hope, was now living a life he was proud of, a life that was his own. One afternoon, Jack found himself walking through the park again, the place where he had spent many quiet moments with his dog. The sun was warm, and the breeze was just enough to make the leaves rustle gently in the trees. He sat on a bench, his dog beside him, and watched the children playing, their laughter filling the air. Jack smiled to himself, thinking about how far he had come. Not too long ago, he had never imagined a day like this. Peaceful, content, and full of hope. He had once been consumed by the fear of the future, but now, he looked ahead with a sense of calm confidence. As the days turned into weeks, Jack continued to find strength in the life he had built. He no longer worried about the uncertainties that had once defined his existence. He had found stability, not just in his job or his home, but in his heart. He had found peace. Jack knew that life would always have its challenges, but with his dog by his side, he was ready to face anything. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and together, they had proven that anything was possible. Jack stood up from the bench and looked around the park, feeling a deep connection to the world around him. He had come so far, and he knew that this was only the beginning of the journey. With his dog by his side, there was nothing he couldn't face, nothing he couldn't overcome. They were a team, and together, they had built a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities.